When teachers train you in descriptive writing, they go large on imagery. But this video is about the secret sauce of descriptive writing, contrast. You're going to get top grade training right now. The easiest way to develop contrast in your writing is to use the word but. You describe something first and then follow it on with a but and a further description. Here I'll show you. A dozen cows grazed in the field. Now, with the addition of the word but, I'm going to introduce a contrast to the verb grazed. The earth was parched, and the few ragged tufts of green didn't satisfy them. So although the cows were grazing, they weren't feeling full. Suddenly I have a really developed description just because I've used a contrast with the word but. In this second example, you'll see how the contrast is built around a near opposite. Sunshine blazed upon the beach, but the freezing sea left the bathers gasping for air. Again, all that detail comes from the but and then thinking of a near opposite to contrast it to. In this example, I'm going to show it to you combined with personification. Autumn painted the hills with browns, russets and golds, so the autumn is being personified as a painter, but winter washed the scene with grey skies and snowy fields. Washed is the verb for painters colouring a background in a particular shade. Contrasting using the seasons is a really easy trick for your description as well. The girl sat listening to her friend's plans, but she didn't dare tell him they were bound to fail. Again, you can see how the verbs are contrasted by being near opposites, just as they were with blazed and freezing. Let's now combine these two ideas of the but contrast and the contrast of opposites. So we could have a description by day and then contrast that with a but for nighttime, a near opposite. And this is super easy for you to do in any descriptive question in the exam. By day, the streets were full of colour and life, from the fruit stalls to the clothing mannequins, from the idle shoppers traipsing with their whining children to the buskers strumming clumsily at the guitar. Notice as well how useful the list sentence is for layering description and creating a vivid picture. By night we're still with the streets, but instead of being full of colour, they're now emptied, because the soul of the town had been stripped out of it, whereas all this description was about how it was full. Stripped out of it by glass-fronted stores, fast food outlets and coffee shops. Now the contrast, which was full of people and children, is going to change. No one lived here except the homeless on their cardboard mattresses in abandoned doorways. And my daytime description finished with buskers and the guitar. Now the contrast is abandoned doorways, silence. Now this has the effect of making your description dynamic with a lot of movement to it. Of course, you can't really put a lot of events in your description because it will turn into a story. But using contrast, you're able to introduce time in this way to look at descriptions as though they were different events. But of course, they're not part of a narrative. They're not a story, so you won't get marked down for suddenly veering into story writing. Another really useful way of introducing contrast is to base it around a character's age. So here imagine an old man. He felt his hip twinge, which on its own was bearable, but as his knees were already filled with gravel and his knuckles filled with crushed glass, he looked for a park bench to rest at. At last, uncomfortably damp with sweat, even in this bitter cold, he sat and propped his stick at his side. So our first contrast is how he's feeling, damp with sweat, and then the contrast with the bitter cold of the weather. Now, another contrast. As the pain eased, he opened his eyes. So this contrasts with the pain he felt when he was moving. Now we have the contrast of age. So young mothers. Young mothers strolled across the park. Notice the verb strolled contrasts with the twinge as he was walking. Some of them striding even in heels. Notice how that contrasts with the pain in his own knees. While their children shot off left and right, so now we have a contrast of age with children moving at speed compared to him who has had to stop with his walking stick and sit on the bench, only to return like boomerangs, screaming with happiness and youth. And so now there is another contrast. Because the children are happy, we infer that the old man might not be. Then in the third paragraph, it's really easy to go into another contrast about age, his memories when he was young. Memories of his young summers came back to him. Notice the season is also a contrast. This feels like winter because of the cold, but he's remembering summer. And one morning, lying in the barley field, with his eyes half shut in the sunshine. Again the contrast of sun with the cold. When, through the swaying stalks, her red dress flashed to him like a beacon, and Susan entered his life. She changed it forever. Now we have a contrast of Susan, this person who he must have fallen in love with the young mothers that someone else has fallen in love with. And also Susan, the love of his life, who we infer is no longer there. He feels alone. So using contrast in this way has allowed us a real insight into this character. We've created a sense of drama even though nothing has happened. All he's done is sat down on his park bench and looked at what's around him. So contrast allows you to invite a narrative into your description without turning it into a story. It's genius, isn't it? All the examples in this video have come from my Ultimate Guide to Descriptive Writing. Links in the didgeridoo below. And if you want to develop your contrast further, check out the next video, which looks at how setting can be contrasted with character. See you over there.